The Livella Part 6 of the Dalliance. In a shocking breach of tradition, the young priestess of the void, Omnia, has been charged to undertake a pilgrimage of naming by her superior, the Hierophant Mali. Although uncomfortable with this, Omnia is bound to do her duty, and so is on the way to the Isle of Dis to conduct the ceremony in which our baby forest brother, whom Mali is scheming to abduct so that she and her father, Ruzavir the Underlord, can have access to the baby's potent fairy blood, is to be named. In the meantime, she is to deliver something Mali gave her to Ruzavir as soon as she arrives. In spite of Priestess Omnia's serious misgivings about her role in this highly unorthodox pilgrimage of naming, she could not help but start to feel a little better as soon as she had put some distance between herself and Hierophant Mali and boarded the crowded hover tram that would take her across all 10 of Itlancor's dactyls to the harbour district which connected the capital with all of Itland's major islands. As the youngest daughter of an influential crystal quarrier and miner on the other side of the main island, Omnia had never actually had the occasion to travel to any of Itland's other islands in her 22 years. She had come overland to Itlancor from the far side of the main island 5 years and quarter of a millennium earlier, somewhat of a misfit in her family, always far more interested in the deeper mysteries of existence than in the more mundane concerns of the residence crystal industry, or, for that matter, in helping to manage the family household and the workers' accommodation annexed to it, like her mother and sisters. And so, possibly as a welcome distraction from the tragedy and subsequent confusion that had so completely uprooted her from her life, she found herself looking forward to broadening her horizons and, who knows, maybe even searching for opportunities to rebuild her life far away from Itlancor and all its memories, and from Hierophant Mali. As she settled into one of the plush-padded seats that lined the sides of the carriages, Omnia became aware of a rather odd-looking fellow with a close-cropped, reddish-brown beard sat opposite her, wearing distinctively exotic clothes, the likes of which Omnia had never seen before. She might have passed it off as her own ignorance of the fashions of this unfamiliar era, but none of the other people in the hover tram were wearing anything even remotely like it either. The man seemed unusually tall, despite the fact that he was sitting down, his legs angling upward and then back towards him awkwardly, in a manner that showed he really could have done with a higher seat. Due to his uncommon height and rare pale blue eyes, many might have guessed that he was a root man. But Omnia, familiar with such matters, could see that he was not. Although tall enough, he was far too slender and scrawny. His demeanour was also very off, eyes darting around nervously, bulging wide in an expression of what seemed like guarded wonder, tinged with barely suppressed panic. Next to him sat a strikingly handsome, dark-haired young man of a more average stature, stylishly dressed in fine but much less conspicuous clothes, who appeared to be teaching the tall man some very basic vocabulary. Omnia observed the odd pair for a time as the hover tram hummed along the wide, sparkling avenues, crossing magnificent bridges, spanning dactyls and gliding past the swirling spires of residential districts that had been engaging each other in competitive magnificence for centuries. She found herself imagining what the story of the two strange men in front of her might be. As someone who was herself feeling quite lost and out of time, she realized she had become much more sensitive to others who exuded a similar energy. The handsome one was clearly trying to teach the tall one some useful words in the Atlantic language for the purpose of elementary communication. This was indeed an unusual sight. Barbarians were an extreme rarity. The Itlan guarded their civilization jealously, with stringent measures in place for vetting and sanctioning outsiders. Seeming at last to sense Omnia's silent observation, the handsome younger man turned towards the priestess. His eyes flickered momentarily over her snug-fitting, feminine, black and white pilgrim's outfit and her two-tone braids, now hanging freely past each shoulder, and seemed to widen slightly in appreciation. He flashed her a charming smile, and then turned back to his companion without waiting to see how she would respond. Now, said the young man, enunciating his words with exaggerated clarity, what is your name? The tall man's face scrunched up in concentration. He began, then reeled off several syllables of something that sounded very alien to Omnia, but that began with Doc. Good, the well-dressed young man crooned encouragingly. Then he murmured to himself, well, good enough for now. Then he addressed the tall man once more. Hello, Doc. Now you ask me, what is my name? He pointed to his own chest. What be you name? The tall man asked him intensely, gesturing with his hands in accompaniment. I am the Dalliance, the young man replied. Who am I? You be Dalliance. The Dalliance, Omnia thought to herself. What kind of a name is that? Who is this guy? Amused and more than a little intrigued, but not wanting to seem too intrigued, she cocked her head off at an angle and strove to listen harder. To her disappointment, the two fell silent. Omnia waited patiently for a moment, but now all she could hear was the dull hubbub of indiscriminate background chatter on the hovertram. A little frustrated, she risked a peek back at the incongruous pair, only to find the young man who had called himself the Dalliance looking right at her. He seemed to be suppressing a grin, and there was a playful twinkle in his eyes. And what be your name, miss? The Dalliance asked her dryly from across the central aisle. Omnia blushed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, she stammered. Course you did, the Dalliance assured her with a magnanimous wave of his hand. Why wouldn't you? We're clearly the most interesting people on this carriage. He preened himself slightly ironically, tugging the folds of his silver-trimmed midnight blue felt jacket and adjusting his lapels in an exaggerated manner. Doc, the tall man next to him, clearly not understanding the exchange, watched him quizzically, then turned to her, as if curious to see her reaction to his companion's behaviour. Omnia looked around, embarrassed. One or two other passengers had frowned slightly at the Dalliance's words, but most were either talking to each other or staring out the windows, watching Itlancourt's outer districts roll by. The Dalliance's eyes darted furtively around the carriage. I'd probably better shut it before someone punches me, he said lightly. Been trying to grow out of being punched lately. Omnia smiled slightly, pleased by his attention, in spite of her embarrassment. Oh, and how's that been working out for you? The Dalliance winced and shifted position in his seat. Definitely some room for improvement on that score, if I'm being honest. He paused for a moment. I didn't catch your name, he added hopefully. I didn't throw it, Omnia replied with a slight smile. The Dalliance shrugged. Fair enough, I'll just call you Penguin then, until you do. He turned back to Doc and continued instructing him, seeming to forget about her completely. From whence does he hail? Omnia, now mildly irritated, demanded after a moment. Say what, Penguin? The Dalliance responded teasingly, breaking off from counting loudly with his fingers in Doc's face. Him! Omnia nodded towards the young man's tall companion. From whence does he hail? She repeated. Oh, I love the way you speak, Penguin, the Dalliance breathed. Whence? And there's me thinking I was the interesting one. Maybe I'll pass Doc here on to you for lessons in speaking classy. His face grew serious. As for where he's from, I'm afraid your guess is as good as mine. I found him wandering around the... He broke off suddenly, as if almost afraid to continue. The grounds of the polyastry, he finished, after a moment's hesitation. Doc, as if suddenly aware they were talking about him, blurted out a mouthful of words in his alien speech, gesticulating and pointing at his wrist with a finger. The exotic man then concluded his unintelligible outburst with a word that Omnia very much did recognize. Unmistakably, he said, Moraz. Then, as if to dispel any uncertainty Omnia might have had about what she had just heard, Doc grabbed the Dalliance by the shoulders and said it again, clearly and distinctly. Moraz! The Dalliance cringed slightly, then closed his eyes in obvious exasperation and sighed deeply, as if a scenario had decided to play out that he had hoped wouldn't happen. He briefly buried his head in his hands, then exchanged a long and meaningful glance with the young priestess, as if he knew that the mention of the Moraz would be of significance to her. For a long moment, Omnia could do nothing but stare back at the dapper young man, all banter and flirtatious impulses suddenly banished from her. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Did Merchant Smalley send you?" she almost hissed. The Dalliance frowned at that, apparently genuinely confused. Who? Next to him, Doc tried to speak again, but the Dalliance held up his hand firmly to signify patience, his demeanor now commanding and no longer playful. Omnia leaned forward. "Listen well, Master Dalliance, or whatever you like to call yourself," she said. "I will tolerate no more of Hierophant Malley's interference, do you understand? I am bound to discharge my pilgrimage and duties to her as agreed, and I intend to do so, but I neither recognize nor agree to any further funny business." The Dalliance held up both hands, his face a picture of innocence. "Penguin! I swear I don't know anything about this Hierophant Malley of whom you speak. I don't know her, and I've never spoken to her. Whatever it is you think is going on here, you're mistaken." "Don't call me Penguin," Omnia snapped. "I am Void Priestess Omnia of the Polyastry of Itlancourt." She raised her chin a little higher in an attempt to look imperious. "And don't expect me to believe you have nothing to do with Hierophant Malley. Your companion speaks of the Moraz, and so our meeting stretches the reach of chance way too far. Do not take me for a fool. If you will not be honest with me, it would be better you said nothing further to me at all." The Dalliance regarded her intensely for several seconds, chewing on his lower lip and apparently weighing his next words with great care. "This is no suitable place for full disclosure," he said finally, indicating the whole carriage full of passengers. "So I'm just going to say for now, in complete honesty, that it's true that I know who you are, where you're bound, and why. And our meeting is no coincidence, as you quite rightly say. But it's also true that I was not sent by this Hierophant of yours, and that I've never even spoken to her." "Then who did send you? What does your alien companion have to do with the Moraz? And what business do you think you have with me?" Omnia demanded bluntly. "Let's wait until we get off this hovertram, shall we?" The Dalliance mouthed silently. Then, out loud, he said, "If I told you that all three of us have an encounter with a certain Livella in common, would you trust me?" The Forest Brothers at the depository were now quite certain that their power array was not being tampered with by the regular local wildlife. For the third night in a row, a primary or secondary resonance crystal had been removed from the array and tossed onto the ground nearby, yet each time a little closer to the forest's edge. "Someone is clearly playing games with us," Weld rumbled as he retrieved a crystal from the ground near the forest's edge for the third morning in a row, clenching it in his heavy fist. "And what's more, soon after our newborn baby brother was deposited here. I don't believe this can be a coincidence." He had taken to carrying the baby with him wherever he went, no longer content to leave him sleeping in his crib inside the depository as Weld went about his daily tasks. This morning, Croit and Herish had joined Naro and Weld in the latest search for the missing crystal, their childish imaginations now fully engaged in the mystery of these recent events.
"Maybe one of the Dryads has gone mad,"
Herish speculated to Croit as Weld showed them how to reset the crystal array.
"Maybe it's the baby's mother and she wants him back."
"Now," Croit scoffed. "Don't you know anything? Dryads are never interested in baby boys. Why do you think we're all here and not with our mums back in the woods?" Herish shrugged.
"I know, but one of them could still go mad, couldn't she?"
"I've never heard of such a thing happening in all the long history of the Forest Brothers," Weld remarked as he slotted the latest missing crystal back in its place. "But to have an open mind is a fine thing, Herish. It's quite proper to ask all the questions you can think of."
Even the stupid ones, Master Weld?
asked Croit cheekily. Even the stupid ones, Croit, Weld replied gravely, giving the middle brother a stern look. Wisdom has been known to cloak itself in stupidity from time to time. You'll do well to keep that in mind, lad. He stood up and looked around. I think I'm going to sit watch tonight. Keep an eye out for whoever or whatever keeps messing with our array. If it's one of the fairy folk, they may dare to confront me. If it's a human, Weld smiled grimly and cracked his knuckles. They probably won't, he concluded. And if they don't, what then? Said Naro. You can't sit watch out here forever. Weld stroked his raspy chin. Well, I'll just have to deal with that if this continues, won't I? If nothing changes, I can always bring it to the attention of the Forest Brothers Guild. Maybe we can get a seer involved. A trained seer, he added, before Naro got a chance to say something out of his opening mouth.
Is Naro really off to seer school then, Master Weld?
Herish asked. Weld smiled at him a little sadly. Yes, I put in a word at the guild. They've arranged to send someone to escort Naro to Hoselex because I have to stay here and guard the baby. I'm told the escort will arrive around the same time as the priestess, which is convenient. We can name the baby and then send our brother Naro on his way.
An escort?
Naro piped up in a voice heavy with contempt.
What do I need an escort for? I can take care of myself.
I'm sure you can, lad, Weld grinned, but it's the done thing. You don't just saunter into seer school without an escort to vouch for you. Anyway, you might be grateful for the company of this particular escort. They told me they were sending a young chap who's no stranger to the Dryad Forests, a holder of the Golden Leaf, who goes by the name of the Dalliance. End of part 6. What does the Dalliance and the Livella at the centre of the Moras have to do with all this? And who is the mysterious stranger known only as Doc? Stay tuned to find out. Hi to all my listeners. A big thank you for tuning into this latest instalment of the Livella. Don't forget, if you do feel inclined to tip me for my work, you can do so via the link in the description. Cheers.